The USA is the greatest country in the world.
Always has been, always will be.
Whether you know it or not, you're part of that legacy.
So here's news that will tickle you red, white, and blue.
Right now, you have the opportunity to win a free trip to Washington, D.C.
We're talking free, gratis, no cash outlay.
It's called the Youth Tour, and it's a trip of a lifetime. From sea to shining sea, we
let freedom ring!
For more than 40 years, the Electric Cooperatives of Texas have been sending people like us to Washington, D.C. on the Youth Tour. Look at the clothes these swingers wore and the dance moves. Wow. Hard to believe that Mom and Dad actually look like that, huh? But for many, this trip was the experience of a lifetime, one that changed them forever.
And now it's your turn to become part of that history. Tune in for the next few minutes and find out what it's like to be on the Youth Tour. Then do whatever it takes to get here next year, because this trip is a pedal to the metal, eat and run, non-stop action-packed adventure. So let freedom ring.
When I won this trip, I was really excited because I was going to Washington, D.C. for free. Great, let's get on the plane now. But that's not the way it works, stranger. Oh no. We all meet in Dallas, then climb on a bus for a 3-day ride to D.C. A bus!
But hey, don't be shy, because we're not talking about no smoke-blowing, bouncer-insides-out, yellow-bellied school bus here, not even slightly. We roll down the road in these giant luxury liners, watch movies to while away the time, and when there's nothing else to do, we sleep. Rock and roll, baby. It has been America's national anthem for the past half-century, and the first thing that we did when we got to D.C. was head on down to the Hard Rock Cafe for good times, cheeseburgers, and souvenirs. After a long bus ride, we were ready to party. We shouted, we sang, and we had a good time. It was a great way to start off the trip. Bright and early the next morning, we met up with over 1,500 kids from all over the USA. It was massive, with kids yelling out their state songs and slogans, smoke machines puffing, and laser lights beaming. We did hear a couple of speakers and learn some stuff about electric cooperatives.
The Smithsonian Institution is sometimes referred to as America's Attic. It is the world's largest museum complex, is located in the Mall in Washington, and attracts more visitors every year than any other tourist center in the nation.
From the first time mankind gazed up at the heavens, there was a dream of flying. The Air and Space Museum is a marquee attraction of the Smithsonian and has the distinction of being the most visited museum in the world. Here, every kind of flying contraption imaginable is on display, starting with the very first powered flying machine, the Wright Flyer. Even in the 21st century, it's still been less than 100 years since this plane broke the bounds of terrestrial confinement and freed us to sail the skyways.
Also hanging around here is the Spirit of St. Louis, which was the first plane to cross the Atlantic in 1927. And hanging next to it is General Chuck Yeager's Bell X-1, which was the first plane to break the sound barrier. There are also many spacecraft and rockets on display here. If you're into the flying thing, you definitely need to check this place out in person.
Well, it takes a special sort to appreciate fine art, and for all of us sophisticated and refined types, there's the National Art Gallery, which houses some of the finest artwork in the world. The astute mixture of color and form creates an intoxicating aura of cerebral euphoria that surrounds one like a swirling kaleidoscope. Plainly said, if you like art, you'll really get off to this stuff. Oh yeah, the statues are definitely worth checking out too.
America is the new kid on the block when it comes to the other countries of this world, but we've been making waves and changing lives like no other nations that ever existed. Take a look at the contributions that we've made to modern life and stand in awe. The American History Museum is a history lesson come to life. It's a testimony to what men and women can do when they let freedom ring.
Before mankind, there was the earth. And our mothership has a history of life that is more diverse and spectacular than you can imagine. In the Natural History Museum, one can get a small glimpse of life on our planet throughout the eons. There is a lesson about our future to be learned from looking at our past. Chew on that thought for a nanosecond, Einstein.
For some of us, visiting the Smithsonian was worth everything we had to do to come on the youth tour, which wasn't much when you consider all the neat stuff we got to do. Remember, you could be doing all this fabulous stuff and more next June if you'll just get in gear, declare your independence from a boring summer, and let freedom ring.
Every year, the youth tour goes to a musical or play. We went and saw the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, Joseph's Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which was really cool. It was a great way to wrap up our first full day in DC. But hey, stay tuned because there's more to come.
FBI Headquarters, Washington, D.C. Yeah, this is definitely top secret information. I'm not really supposed to say much about it, but here's the details of our visit to this place. We got to see state-of-the-art forensic laboratories, learn about some of history's most notorious criminals, and see what happens when the long arm of the law catches up with criminals who run afoul of the law. I'd like to tell you more about it, but if I did, I'd have to erase your memory.
The Washington National Cathedral is a beautiful Gothic structure that was an idea first conceived by George Washington. He wanted a place where Americans of all denominations could come and worship.
Inside, this place dazzles the eyes and lifts the spirits. The beauty of the sanctuaries is literally breathtaking. It was interesting to find out that this masterpiece contains Texas limestone. Throughout, the many stained glass windows depict stories from the Bible to modern-day times. There's even a window with a rock from the moon in it.
Okay, girls, let's talk a minute here. The Sunset Parade is an exhibition put on by the Marines in front of the Iwo Jima Memorial. It's an excellent example of precision marching, and they even have a squad that performs without any verbal commands. And yes, you get to spend some time up close and photogenic with the guys in uniform.
Standing on the steps of the Capitol is an overpowering experience. One that is especially moving considering this place was probably the only target spared from the 9/11 attack. You have to be impressed by all the great Americans that have stood in this exact spot throughout the history of our country. Having your picture taken here makes you part of that history.
Inside, the Capitol building is filled with spectacular paintings that tell the famous stories of our American history. At the top of the rotunda sits George Washington, surrounded by angels, who looks down upon all that visit. It is truly an amazing building.
One of the highlights of the youth tour is visiting your congressman in his office. He treated us like very important people.
Texas. I'm Amy, I'm from Berkeley. This is the second Congress in history in which one state, Texas, has the chairman and the ranking member of the House Ag Committee. And not only that, we're neighbors and we're good friends.
This trip is great. We get to see a lot of historical things, visit impressive buildings, and hear informative lectures. But we also get to let our hair down and get jiggy with it. The All-States Dinner and Dance is a chance to shake and shout with other kids from around the country. We rocked the place until they made us leave. Of course, the folks from Texas showed them how it was done.
Mount Vernon is the plantation that George Washington called home. He loves this place with a passion that is unrivaled in American history. Walking through the house, you get to see what everyday life was like for him. More than 80% of this structure is original. It does something to you when you rub your hand across a banister and realize he touched the same wood.
A new stop on the youth tour is the Naval Museum. It is a splendid memorial dedicated to the fighting men and women of America. At the Naval Museum, there is equipment that through the centuries have helped preserve America's freedom. There is even a ship anchored there that you can tour and get a first-hand idea of what life is really like at sea.
This is a place where the true meaning of power strikes one. The White House is the residence of the most powerful person on the planet. When you stand and look at its manicured lawns, graceful fountains, and marble columns, you realize that beauty and power can intersect at the same spot.
One thing we do all the time on the youth tour is eat. In fact, some of us thought we were on the Eat Your Way Across America trip. When you pack, put some of your bigger clothes in for the return side. You will definitely come back a couple of sizes bigger.
The Jefferson Memorial sits on the bank of the tidal basin. It was built in honor of the man who wrote our Declaration of Independence and was the third president of the United States.
The 40-foot bronze statue stands looking across the landscape. When I looked at the statue, it made me think of how fortunate this country has been to have outstanding people when they were needed. It was almost like you could hear Mr. Jefferson speaking across time, saying, "Let freedom ring."
The memorial dedicated to President Franklin Roosevelt is completely different from any of the other presidential memorials. It's a collection of waterfalls, and statues that look out over the city as they soothe the visitor. It's a thought-provoking place befitting the only man to be elected 4 times by his countrymen to serve as president.
In Arlington National Cemetery, as far as the eye can see, there are white headstones marking the final resting spot of those who served our country in the military. This hallowed ground is where more than 200,000 of America's sons and daughters are buried. No matter which way you look, the headstones are in a row.
Freedom is not free. It requires sacrifice, sometimes the ultimate sacrifice. I helped lay a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown. As the bugler was playing taps, I couldn't help but give thanks to all of those who have helped keep America safe and free.
John F. Kennedy will always be remembered as the president who ignited our imaginations with the unlimited promise of a future. It was a shock to the nation when the youngest president this country ever had was assassinated in Dallas of November 1963. The eternal flame at his gravesite reminds us all of the light that he cast for a short time. May we never forget it.
In my little town, mass transit means a bunch of pickup trucks down in front of the Dairy Queen. But on the youth tour, we got to ride the Metro, Washington, D.C.'s subway system. It was really cool being packed in cars like sardines and hanging on for dear life from the ceiling rails.
You've seen it on television and in the movies, but until you actually stand at the foot of the Lincoln Memorial, you can't really appreciate how large and beautiful it is. The eyes of the statue seem to follow you no matter where you go. His vision of the mighty nation we could be is the reality we live today.
My visit to the Vietnam War Memorial was something I will never forget. As I stood looking at the statue of the 3 soldiers, it seemed like they were alive. At the wall, I made a rubbing of a name. I did not know who he was, but I felt something while I was doing it. Like by simply being there, he was not forgotten. When you look at the more than 58,000 names on that wall, you are struck by the spirit of this nation and its belief that men and women around the world have the right to be free.
The Korean War was fought in the early 1950s and was long known as America's Forgotten War. It took almost a half a century for these American heroes to be honored with a memorial in our nation's capital city. It is one of the more unusual sights that features a squad of 19 soldiers moving through a rice paddy.
Lookout Mountain, Tennessee is the final stop on the youth tour and the place where we hold our last Sunday celebration service. For more than a week, we have traveled like one big family. As we ride a cable car almost a mile into the sky, the clouds are so close it feels like you can almost reach out and touch them. At the top, we celebrate our friendship and freedom. It is an especially moving experience because we know that soon we will have to say goodbye to all our new friends.
When you pack your stuff to come on the ship, be sure to bring comfortable shoes. We walk until it seems like our legs are going to fall off. But hey, it's a small sacrifice to let freedom ring.
Well, that's the youth tour.
A 12-day trip that will change your life forever.
Do whatever it takes to go on this trip next year.
Because it is definitely the experience of a lifetime.
And it will give you a chance to discover why we let freedom ring.